Hello, everyone. This is Kathy Mason from MasonWorks Marketing here today on Co-Creators Global Village as part of World Unity Week with my friend, Dr. William Spady, who I'm going to call Dr. Bill most of this time. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Kathy.
So, Bill, I am so excited to introduce your work to this audience because it's profoundly beneficial for these changing times. And it works on a macro, micro way of working on the person as well as on the exterior. Bill is a expert on education reform, and how many years?
Oh, it's been 50 or so.
Okay, well, I was going to say 40 plus years. Yeah. And in fact, we were lucky to produce this book for him. There's three books that we've produced for him. And this is a compilation of, I think, 11 experts and Bill bringing heart and soul to education. So, Bill, how did you first get started on this path of education reform?
Well, it was an easy leap. My background is in sociology. I have my PhD from the University of Chicago, and my first job was at Harvard, which was a bit of a surprise. Since when I left high school, I said, I'll never go to an Ivy League school. I don't want to go to an Ivy League school, and there's my first job. But I was talking with a colleague who was doing work with a very famous educator, Dr. Benjamin Bloom, and they were putting out a new model of classroom instructional reform. All right, and he was explaining all of this to me. And with my sociological hat on, I said, I was impressed with what they were doing, by the way. And I declared those famous words, "This will never work." And my colleague said, "What do you mean this will never work? Look at all these data we're showing you." And I said, "Yes, but you're forgetting." And out of my mouth came what I've called Spady's laws, okay? The first one was, but the certification system drives the instructional system, okay? And number two, the certification system is time-based.
Right.
The certification system is based on what? Credit hours, seat time days, calendar years, and when the calendar dates come, opportunity ends. Yes. And your model assumes there's going to be continuous opportunity. And that's not the way the system works.
Wow.
And I left that meeting, with such a feeling. We have an insane system. And until he mentioned that to me, I just took it for granted, like everybody else does.
Yes.
I was in a paradigm of understanding education because I've had so much of it, and it always was time-based.
Right.
Okay, it was absolute, and time, the clock, the schedule, and the calendar were governing opportunity structures and for students as well as teachers. Okay, and I left there saying, man, I don't know when I'm going to do it, but I've got to do something about changing this system. So I have always had a big macro system focus, which increasingly has gone down and down and down and down to, so what's learning itself? And then it went down to who's the learner, okay? And what are the potentials of learners? And the curriculum of that system isn't really addressing that at all. So my work has evolved. It's been a gigantic evolution as I've tried to persuade colleagues, hey, there is absolutely a different way of doing business here, except as you'll see, we're locked into something I call educentrism, okay, which is a closed system way of thinking about all of this. So I'd like to share my ideas about that and what have been 5 decades of experience in how this evolution has unfolded for me.
Great, great. So want to also bring up that your work is accepted and revered internationally. You spent 3 years in the Philippines. You work with people in the Arabian part of the world. And so a lot of the people that are seeing your work, which is object-based education, and you'll be talking more about that, people are seeing the value of it, and other people around the world are seeing the value of it and embracing it.
Well, yeah, thank you. I've actually worked on every continent except South America. A lot of time in Australia, also in Africa and South Africa a lot, as well as Asia. And so I've sort of been all over the world with these ideas. Unfortunately, the edu-centric policymakers of the world have captured this concept of outcome-based education, and they've simply built an accreditation system around what they think outcomes are. And that accreditation system, that is, they make all the schools, and especially the universities now across the world, all think they have to jump through the hoops of this accreditation system. And the accreditation system is time-based and curriculum-based and everything else. And all it does is reinforce educentrism itself, this closed system way of thinking. So unfortunately, I haven't been popular with all of those people, but the educators themselves understand it because they understand their students. And their students are human beings, okay? And the students coming to us today are different students than I was when I entered school countless years ago, okay? And just sort of did everything that was in the curriculum. And then there were, multimedia and all of the things that are available to children and youth today didn't exist for us. When television hit our city, I was already in high school, okay? And so the world has changed radically, and the educational system, the definition of curriculum and courses and grade levels and everything else hasn't changed at all.
Right.
And that's what's been so distressing. It's like, can't you see it, folks? We created this system, the structure of this system in the 19th century. And it has taken a form where nobody seems to either want to or able to get a handle on it. And I just said, I'm going to try my hardest to get enough people to pay attention and wake up to this, that we can do something about it.
Well, I'm excited about your presentation and sharing your insights, because what we're talking about is changing the factory-based education system to a system that creates a level of competency in its students and potential creativity for problem solving and other creative thought processes that is what we need to go forward for humanity in all these changing times. So I'm very excited to hear more from you. And I know we only have a little bit of time, so hopefully you'll be able to get some basic concepts out and that people will go look you up and spend more time and connect with you to discuss deeper issues as they need help, because we are in a huge opportunity, huge time of change, and all these systems need to be changed.
Well, I'm delighted to have this opportunity. I will share this as coherently as I can. Yes, our time is limited, so I'll be as focused as I can and as clear as I can. And thank you for this opportunity of sharing, Kathy.
Oh, sure, sure. So did you still want to talk about the symphony too?
Well, only in this regard. Yesterday, I had the opportunity, even though I have performed this piece myself, because I was a symphony musician back in the day also, but I had the opportunity of hearing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which is very famous, very, very famous. And I understand German, and I knew the German text of the symphony, and I was struck, given this opportunity of speaking about world unity and unity, for me, unity consciousness, okay, that the text is really about sort of the narrator in the text is about come millions of brothers and share in the joy and the light, okay, of unity, of the divine. And we know that our creator is above the clouds, okay, but unites us all. And I mean, that's the general gist of what's being sung by the chorus and the soloists. And I sat there saying, the timing of this is perfect. I mean, World Unity Week, and there is a World Unity piece of incredible piece of music. Yes.
It just shows there's an innate longing for us to be in unity and peace. That this paradigm we're in right now, which will be shifting back to that, has been a challenge. It's been competition versus collaboration. And so what you're offering is a new look at the education system, at leadership, at lots of ways for us to redefine what it means to have a human experience, right?
Indeed. Let's get going here.
Okay.
And
okay.
I'll clarify how a lot of that all fits together.
Great. Okay.
All right. Where I'd like to begin, Kathy, is to focus on this word paradigms. I've understood the work of Dr. Joel Barker ever since 1980. He's been around that long, and so have I. And he had a famous quote, which is at the bottom of the screen, that when a paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. Well, what a paradigm is for me is the image of reality. What is truly real that we carry in our heads? Now, that tends to be subjective, but we think it's concrete and real. It influences how we think, what we believe, what we say and do. It really governs how we do things. And when people go back to zero, it can be an enormous challenge, which I have illustrated here in this diagram. Okay, Shifts, paradigm shifts, and new zeros. If you go back to letting go of that reality, what you think is the way things are, I've put plus signs in front of some of these statements, and I have minus signs in front of others, because yes, it is a transformation to new beginnings, but it can cause people to lose their bearings. But it opens major doors of realization, which is usually what drives you back to zero. Okay, but it introduces strange and unfamiliar things because it is the new information, the new ideas, the new concepts, the new possibilities that bring us to zero. That zero offers us a more expansive grounding. It opens new patterns of thinking and doing, and it can be, for change agents and leaders like myself, vital points of intervention and creation. We create from zero. If we're not at zero, we're simply modifying what already exists. So for me, this whole issue of paradigms, what they are and how they affect us, has been a central part of my work. And I have emphasized them as grounding tools for us to work with as we look at both learning and education. My own personal paradigm is spiritual. My sociological paradigm as a sociologist is both strategic and functional, and it's technical, and it's absolutely systematic. So the petals of this sort of a flower really are how I have applied my own sense and spirituality of who are we as human beings, and how do we get the system to change? How do we get the system to recognize that and honor that? And that's where the strategy and the technique and the functionality and the systemic thinking come into play. Modern education, as I noted a second ago with Kathy, is time-based and it's curriculum-based. Curriculum structures have been with us, those of us in the United States, and internationally, actually even longer than that, okay, since the middle of the 19th century. The basic structure of the curriculum hasn't changed, okay? It's requirements-based, okay? And the requirements are that you need to do this and you need to do that, and you need to do it within the time blocks that we have for education. And as I mentioned, we have built a whole accreditation system that does nothing but reinforce that for educators, okay? Whether they like it or not, that's what they are being compelled to do. All of that is about institutional inertia. It just keeps going and going and going and going. And it's what I call educentrism, okay? The paradigm itself, how we think about education, how we think about learning, comes from this whole set of constraints that you see on your screen. Okay. Notice it's not learning based. Notice it's not human based. Notice it's not talent based. It's structure based. It's structure based. That's the message that needs to get out, and people need to be bringing that to their policymakers and decision makers. Okay, that great, what I call educentric entrenchment has been institutionalized by educators. Okay, it's been legalized and turned into laws and regulations, mountains deep of laws and regulations about how the system is supposed to operate. It's endorsed in teacher and faculty contracts. Okay, it's been internalized by the public and parents because they all went to school, and school is part of the paradigm. So they sat in school for however many years it was, and that's what school was. That's what modern education was. It's been legitimized through reforms. In the United States, we never end our reforms. We're constantly, quote, reforming this same educentric system, but we're not thinking out of the box and we're not acting out of the box when we do it. And the media only feeds into it because the media gives us the languaging and the test scores and all of the things that are part of that educentric system. They just keep giving it back to us. We've been doing that so long that people think this educentric paradigm is sacred and that God created it in whatever words we use for the word God. Educentrism is a reflection of our society. It's a reflection of our 3D existence here on Earth. And that system, that whole paradigm, that mega paradigm, is about competition, comparison. Are you doing better than somebody else? We credential according that, compliance with, you do have to do the requirements, you have to take the right courses, you have to get the right degrees, you have to do the right kinds of things in order to graduate. And all of that is a giant system of control. We need something that, as it were, brings continuity and coherence to what we do. But all of this has been turned into regulation that if you do it the right way, you're a winner. And if you don't do it the right way, well, that's just too bad. Now, outcomes are derived. People who we say we want there to be outcomes from education, and I have been a champion of that idea because the outcome is the ultimate purpose. It's manifested in the learners as the ultimate purpose for which we are educating. What is that purpose? Well, those purposes come from a whole range of things, okay, including our values, attitudes, and priorities, okay, and our view of human potential. We have a very, very, very limited view of human potential that's manifested in education because most of it really has to do with intellectual ability. And then all the other stuff besides that is just regarded as extras, okay? Outcomes come from, they can come from all of these sources. Our perceptions of the future we wish to have, how we regard our ecosystem and whether we want people to attend to that or not. But mostly it's our attachments to tradition because that's how we were educated and that's how we were brought up as children, et cetera, et cetera. All of this shapes our sense of self. And our sense of self, whether that is a unified, unity-oriented sense of self, i.e., I am a member of the whole human family, or I am this individual doing whatever I can to compete and survive, all of that gets embedded into what we call outcomes. Well, in my 5 decades of being outcome-based and being a paradigm shifter and having evolved my own work and learning tremendously, I've encountered 6 different sort of mega patterns of what outcomes are all about. And the one that's about educentrism, the one that was there way back in the beginning of my career that we dealt with, and it's still there. It is absolutely still there. It's about achieving academic success and credentials. That's why an enormous number of people are in educational programs, whether it's in community colleges, whether it's in universities, whether it's in various technical institutes. It's to have the academic success that gives them the credentials necessary to go into successful employment. But when you have to master skills for successful employment, it means you have to do more than just think and know and regurgitate information on examinations. You have to be able to do something. And I think that this second reason, okay, which it took us in all of our work, it was over 15 years before we realized that we had an extremely limited view of learning, because it was simply, we called it one-dimensional learning. It was what happens in your head. It's cognitive learning, which is absolutely critical, but then it just stopped there. What about the ability to do something? So we stretched and stretched up to that paradigm and that set of outcomes. But you have to be able to do it in a changing world. And that meant life challenges. And what we came to understand is that outcomes are really three-dimensional. They have to do with the content you learn and the concepts. They have to do with the competence you develop, number two, and they have to do with the context in which you are functioning and operating. And what education provides is an absolutely artificial and limited context. You're sitting in a classroom, you're sitting in seats, you're taking notes, okay? And life is out there. Your career is out there, okay? In a ever-changing complex context, and education sort of hopes and prays that what you're learning there will get out the door. We really pushed on that issue. Number three really broke the door open because it made us future focused. They're going to be having to function and learn and operate and thrive out there, not just in school and classes. Though this fourth one absolutely blew the door open. Okay, is the purpose of education to develop the human being and their innate interests and potentials? And we were showing people's frameworks of kinds of intelligence, kinds of frameworks. I mean, all kinds of things that were absolutely obvious, but they didn't fit into this edu-centric filter that was in most of the curriculum. The fifth paradigm, which I'll be laying out and explaining, is that when the fulfilled human being, okay, the individual who has broken through all of this actually says, I want to bring my gifts to humanity. I want to make the world a better place. Okay, how can I do it? Where can I do it? Okay, and that is reinforced in the sixth one. That is where we model and advance humanity's most fundamental essence. And that most fundamental essence is we are beings of energy, eternal, infinite kinds of potential, unified. We hold unity consciousness, but all of these other kinds of things intrude and intrude. What if we could build a system based on paradigm number 6 here, and then design these other things to be aligned with it and coherent with it? So paradigm 1, very quickly, okay? This is edu-centrism. Okay, I call it academic enculturation, and it's driven by something I call the CBO syndrome. Okay, that the outcomes that people develop are actually based on the curriculum they already have, rather than the other way around, developing curriculum for the outcomes we want to have. Okay, it's content-bound objectives. It's calendar-based opportunities, because when you run out of official time, the opportunities end because you get graded and marked permanently, and it goes on your record. Okay? Convention-bound orientations, this is all about what we have been doing, etc., are conventional ways of thinking about education. It's a cellular-based organization in which programs and people, etc., are all classified in different kinds of ways, starting in kindergarten, and it goes on and on and on and on for year after year in these cells we call grade levels, we call them subject areas, we call them major fields, etc., that are inherently constraining. It's a compliance-based obedience. You have to follow the rules and you have to do it the right way, or you're not going to pass and you're not going to get credit. And most of all, it's what has happened to education as we've lost the meaning for learning and development. And it's all about how much credit do I get, and will the credit lead to a diploma, and therefore will the diploma get me a job? Okay, that's paradigm number one. Paradigm two is what shifts us from content learning to competence. Okay, it's the ability, it cultivates the ability to do tangible things with what you know. Okay, it's nice to know it, but knowing it isn't enough if you can't do something tangible, practical, useful, etc., with what you know. Okay, it implements two-dimensional learning. That is, it's not only the learning that's in your head, it's the learning in your hands. And when you go to that paradigm, many more people feel comfortable with it because they are hands-on learners, not just intellectual, theoretical, cognitive learners that the education system values so much. Paradigm two transcends paper, pencil, tests, and transcripts. Okay, when you are doing concrete things, building things, creating things, revising things, whatever it may be, just think of all those action verbs that English teachers talk about. When you do that, none of that's on a paper, pencil test. It's about your ability to function effectively with skill in some arena of endeavor. Those things are developed through focused practice, okay? Becoming a musician, which I did, hours and hours and hours and hours of practice on mastering my instrument. They're essential for hands-on applications. This whole paradigm is, etc. And that led us to the third paradigm, the leap to actual life performance. Okay, and I developed this clever little saying back in the day that every time you do something, which is paradigm two, every time you do something, you do it somewhere. Well, somewhere is context. It's the situation, it's the circumstances, it's the conditions under which we ask a person to do things. Learning becomes three-dimensional. Content, okay, competence in context, in the situations where it actually has to be done. It's role performances in real contexts. And our whole version of and vision of learning kept expanding and expanding and expanding back in that time when paradigm three emerged, because it transcends subject constraints. Okay, the world is not made up of, okay, the subject matter disciplines. Okay, the world doesn't function that way. It includes in integrated applied ways all the things in those disciplines. But this notion of role performance links directly to life endeavors, and we developed some frameworks, especially one that radically expanded the range of IQ applications and EQ, emotional intelligence, kinds of learning experiences. That framework we call the life performance wheel. All right. And very briefly, okay, this framework it's been to every continent. It's been in almost every presentation I've done for the last 30 years. And it is basically showing all of the essential things that any good functioning adult is going to have to be able to do effectively in their life, including parents, including parents. Professionals have to do it, parents have to do it, okay? Everyone has to develop these kinds of skills. Now, let me draw your attention to this before I go to the next slide. There's a dotted line going horizontally across the wheel. Everything below it is a product of more pragmatic, tangible kinds of skills. You can learn those and do those on your own if necessary. The ones above require other human beings. It's social interactional skills. It's what Daniel Goleman, who was the leader of, and actually the creator of the term emotional intelligence, called intrapersonal intelligence. All of those things require practice, 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 and none of them are going to be on a test. None of them, okay? They're human endeavors. So to interpret the wheel, let's recognize that everything below the line are applications of Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive objectives, which almost every educator anywhere in the world has learned about. But above the line are applications of the interpersonal domain, okay, which can't be done solo. This is the heart of human relationships. Relationships are interpersonal and require interpersonal capacities. Now, what's absent? Okay, because this wheel, everybody loved the wheel when they saw it. What's absent is the intrapersonal, the interpersonal intelligence of the human being, okay, which was enormously important in Goleman's work, okay, because it's the key to inner growth. It reflects the evolution of the self and the soul, and it's the essence of unity consciousness. So what's been missing from all of this, the first four paradigms really has been focused attention on that intrapersonal capacity and ability that we all have, our soul essence as human beings. Everybody knows Abraham Maslow's work, okay? He had this hierarchy. I've simply redefined the hierarchy, and I want to show this slide to you as sort of a step one, because it's a reflection, notice, of humanity's separation paradigm. That is, we are all different. We are all individuals, okay? Our ego self is driving and defining, okay, this whole hierarchy of what we think is development, okay? We call it that, all right? Which requires effort, it requires heavy endeavor, okay, because we're going from survival to safety to then a feeling of security and status and more significance, which is supposed to lead to something called self-actualization. That is where we come to realize, I've really fulfilled myself in life. What I believe happens, I put down at the bottom, is the separate self, Okay, the individual self sacrifices, strives, struggles for significance as they go up and up and up and up and up. We're going to look at the alternative in just a few minutes. Okay, but we could say that those first four paradigms, okay, academic enculturation, applied performance, etc., those first four paradigms are really grounded in this kind of thinking about who are we and what is life all about. And I cannot overemphasize, it is grounded in the essence, the self essence we hold of our ego. Its job is to help us negotiate life safely and well in 3D. But what if life is more than 3D? Because what self-empowerment does, and that is the key, okay? This fourth paradigm, okay, was for us a huge breakthrough. And where my learnings in the last, I'm going to say, decade and a half or so have gone is that if we want students to be self-directed, that opens the door to self-awareness in a deeper way, to self-exploration, to self-assessment, to real self-empowerment. And self-empowerment to me, okay, that's why I've called this paradigm the self-empowerment paradigm. Self-empowerment is about waking up, okay, and speaking up and showing up and standing up for who you really are as a human being. And that is not the conditioning that many of us got in our families when we were supposed to grow up and be like everybody else and fit into how everything was out there in 3D. Now, self-empowerment takes us to mega leaps forward. One of them is self-regulation, which is that when we put ourselves in a state of reflection, and when we can calm the ego down and really listen, okay, our inner self, okay, what this wonderful woman I worked with for 2 decades, Dr. Liana Matulich, calls our inner key, okay? Our inner key wants us to be successful. Our inner key, how we are actually innately wired as human beings. If we can create that self-regulation, oh my goodness, the capacities that open up for us are absolutely remarkable. And I have experienced much of that through her incredible work. What others like Dr. Bruce Lipton tell us is that, and the work of the HeartMath Institute in the state of Iowa, what they tell us is the more self-regulation we do, and the deeper we go into those processes, we can actually shift and change the rate at which human cell division slows down, which means we live longer. We can change how our physical, chemical bodies function and operate when we go into these higher states of what people call reflection, meditation, mindfulness, etc. When we get to paradigm 4, and when our work got to paradigm 4, it created for me, this was my personal mantra, okay? this model we call the 5 Cs. And it's at its core, at its center, is perceptive consciousness. We truly become more conscious, and it takes us to a 4D view of what's possible in the world rather than the 3D, more constraining view. We willingly collaborate. There is greater deep compassion. Our expansive creative potential begins to really manifest, okay? And our unique competences as individuals begin to really flourish and radiate. That is the door, the key, I believe, to the 5th paradigm that we have advocated and began to build in some of our educational models in both the United States, also in South Africa, and in the United States as well. It elevates all of what we shared here with the notion of service to humanity. I'm not just living this and developing for myself. And I believe that's what unity consciousness begins to really, really spark and unfold in this. It is to be of service to humanity because humanity is me. Okay, I'm part of it. It's part of me. It's part of what in that Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the text was brothers, come together. Okay, come together. In other aspects of my work, Kathy mentioned leadership work, etc. I've done a ton of that, written two books about it with a wonderful colleague, Dr. Charles Schwann. It links strongly to the model that we developed of not only the total leader that we called it, but the total professional. And the total professional operates with integrity and dedication, not just expertise. And I think that's absolutely vital. This 5th paradigm is a paradigm of service. It is beyond the ego. It is a bigger sense of self of the individual. And, excuse me, it transcends the selfish grip of the 3D ego self, our 3D ego. It's not, we need ego, we need 3D, we need to be safe. But the ego wants to keep everything within the boundaries it thinks are safe, which means we don't expand much beyond 3D thinking and 3D application when that happens. It opens the door to what a lot of people are calling 5D, 5th dimensional awareness and experience. And I have been blessed to have had many, many of those in my life, which has really been the stimulus for this continued work that I've done. We put a lot of that into the book that Kathy showed you, Bringing Heart and Soul to Education. She published the book. We did it, and this all came together for us in 2014. And much of this is laid out in my latest book, 2020 in 2020, Outcome-Based Education's Empowering Essence. Unfortunately, most of the world thinks that outcome-based education's essence is about edugocentrism. Okay, it's about how the system is functioning and working. And in fact, it is an expression of that 5th paradigm that I've just mentioned. It is about learner empowerment and how outcome-based education can, in fact, serve that. And that brings me to why you're here. You're here because of deep experience with unity consciousness and a desire for unity consciousness in the world. This is about being, from my point of view, cosmic love, light, and life. It's a convergence. It's about bringing all of them together. This state of being lies beyond 3D reason. When people have true experiences of unity, etc., their perceptions, their experiences, etc., go way beyond what 3D thinks is normal and sane and reasonable. So to bring people into this fold that we feel requires using, I have found at least, requires fully invitational language, okay? Bringing people in with metaphors, okay, experiences, etc., that we know to be real, and to be gentle with them in bringing that in. I call them reality expanding experiences. We could call them, going back to the beginning of the presentation, paradigm shifting direct experiences. Now, for people who are very mental, okay, I mean, their approach is really coming from their mental, cognitive, people say left brain orientation. The work of some of the people I'm going to mention in just a minute, quantum physicists and quantum physics as a field, is showing us, okay, the physics of the world is showing us that everything is in fact united and unified. And we are an aspect, we are an embodiment of that unity principle. That's the work I'm entirely focused on in the new aspects of my career now. We are embodiments of that unity principle, the whole universe as a field, an undivided cosmic field. The experiential processes, etc., is a bridge for people who function more in the heart. And they've had, and they feel much more affinity about this than do the people who strictly want to be mental. But I was purely mental, okay? I didn't become a Harvard professor by feeling my way there, okay? I was totally inside of academic acculturation, and I was totally inside of applied performance as well. But things happened, and I grew just like you're growing, okay? And we can bring the unity consciousness to the world through the right kinds of tools. When that happens, and this is the second Maslow paradigm or Maslow model that I show, all right? Self-actualization, when people think, aha, I have really become my own person, there is an entire universe of possibility that lies beyond that. And I just found all of these S words, okay? Whether it's serendipity or service or spontaneity or synergy or serenity, all of them are part of this universal field of experience that people have when they go beyond the ego-driven necessities of life. That's our essence. Our essence is all of those S words. That's our essence paradigm. And I leave that with you as a reminder, okay? The 3D paradigm is small and limited See, you notice this isn't a mountain, okay? This isn't a pyramid. The top is open. It's like a volcano. And when it, quote, erupts and experiences open and we become more and experience more, we know, okay, we can't eliminate them, but we know there is so much more to life and so much more to our inner essence than simply what's been in our kind of three-dimensional world. When that happens, unity consciousness emerges. Okay, we express and realize our innate creativities. We have a connection with Source itself, whether we call it God or Allah or any other name. Okay, we recognize our universal and source. Our contributions to the world are absolutely spontaneous. Naturally, we do that. They don't have to be thought about. We come from a position of giving the gifts of ourselves that we have to others to enhance their lives, not just to enhance ours. And our compassion is instinctive. Our caring about how the world works and who's there, who needs support, how can we make things better. All of that is absolutely instinctive. It requires no deliberate thought for our response. I put many of my 5D experiences, many of them, into a book, Opening to Greater Realities, which Kathy published in 2013. The book contains things that have happened my whole life, up and through the year 2012, and they were remarkable. There are things in here I would have never, ever anticipated, known, experienced, described as part of who Bill Spady was, all right, until they happened. And those gifts came from my reading of all of the books that Neale Donald Walsch had written. They were absolutely key, and my subsequent relation with him and bringing his thinking and work into the world of education through Tom Kenyon, who is an absolutely remarkable sound healer and channel and connector to higher beings of various lineages and kinds. A remarkable person. All of these people you can find on the internet. Dr. David Hawkins' work was very, very instrumental in the early days of my real awakening, and the development of his consciousness scale and the use of kinesiology to measure and reflect the level of conscious awareness embodied not only in people, but in various phenomena and choices in life, etc. His original book, I think, was done in 1995. It was called Power versus Force. And power was about our inner power, and force was about what we have to do when we're in 3D. Dr. Matulich, I mentioned, extraordinary neurofeedback genius. She had her MD at the age of 19, okay, and was mountains and mountains and mountains above other people in her neurofeedback field as she was experimenting and researching more and more and more about our fundamental inherent capacities. Greg Brayton, we know he is in the process of what I call rewriting humanity's story. Our potentials are so much greater, and he's been uncovering them and working collaboratively with this man who I think is on the verge of redefining and formulating the whole field of quantum physics. He's working with Braden. He has an institute called the Resonance Science Institute, I believe it is. Absolutely remarkable individual sharing his gifts. Dr. Bruce Lipton, I mentioned, a pioneer in epigenetics and the self-generation capacities we have as individuals. He works very often with Braden in collaboration and Harriman as well. Dr. Don Beck, who inherited a model or took over the model of spiral dynamics, originally created by a man who's passed on named Claire Graves. Spiral dynamics is something really worth looking into. The book that Beck wrote a couple of decades ago is the foundational book on the topic, and it's a way of looking at our evolution further. Katie Rubin, a remarkable person that I'm working with personally, and a man, David Maria, the Eden template, does absolutely remarkable, amazing work. So I want to close this with
we're pretty much out. We're over our time, so just
okay.
Apologize, but yeah.
All right. Well,
So
you'll see this. This is my logo, and it's been on every one of the slides, and it comes from a very remarkable experience I had in 2011 in the Utah desert. Thank you very much. This has been a wonderful opportunity. I hope you gained a lot from it. Thank you.
So Bill, could you show the last slide, please, with your
website,
yes, please?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
I hope, of course, this was just the tip of the iceberg. As you can imagine, there's so much wonderful information that Bill has and applicable tools that he has at his fingertips from doing this work all these years, and his huge network of people worldwide that follow him. He's considered the father of object-based education, and is an honorary participant and speaker at international events worldwide. So with that, I want to make sure everyone goes to Bill's website, which is williamspady.com. Bill, is there any other way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, email if they want to, if they have questions or want to pursue this further. It's very simple. billspady@gmail.com. And I'd love to hear from you if you want to pursue any of this further. Thank you.
Wonderful.